Good morning. If everyone could take their seat, we're going to begin. Is this mic on? You can hear it? Okay. Bill, just for the record, 3 members of this committee does make a quorum. Is that correct? Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to welcome all of you here this morning for the Committee on Affordability, Accountability, and Planning. Getting started a little late this morning. I would like to give you all some advice. I've already talked with Sharon, but if you ever do stay at the Doubletree across from UT Stadium, make sure that you ask for the cemetery side. Okay? If not, you're going to have an intimate relationship the entire evening with I-35. Okay? I would like to remind everyone that this meeting is being broadcast, and if you all would kind of make sure that your cell phones are on silent, it would be very much appreciated. Hope I got mine there. Without further ado, we'll move to agenda item number 2, is approval of the minutes from the December 12th, 2012 meeting of the Committee on Affordability, Accountability, and Planning. Members?
Move approval. Second.
There's no further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Agenda item 3 is consideration of approval of the consent calendar for the committee. There was an updated consent calendar sent out and is also at your place. Are there any questions, concerns, comments?
Okay, this is the updated.
Yeah, you can take a minute to look at it.
Yeah. I believe typographically that should read 5A, 1, 2, 1, 3, 4, 5. And the other question I have, are we not including the proposed rules 1, 2, and 3G? Are those being removed from the consent? The original consent had proposed rules. It's listed correctly as I. It's actually G, 1, 2, and 3. And is there any reason that those rules cannot be part of the consent calendar? I guess I'm looking at Bill. Mr. Chairman, I would ask typographically that the revised consent calendar be altered such that it would be 5A, 1, 3, 4, and 5, and 5G, 1, 2, and 3 be added to the revised consent calendar as it was originally published. And I would move adoption.
Second.
We're in order there. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Agenda item 4 is public testimony. I believe it was verified that there is no public testimony. Is that correct? Okay. Agenda item 5A is consideration of construction, rehabilitation, and property purchase projects. That was item 5A2, Tarleton State University, construct the A.O. Grant Humanities Building expansion in Stephenville. Mr. Dan Kennedy, Director of Project Planning, Texas A&M University System, will provide a presentation. Mr. Kennedy, you have somebody with you? If y'all would,
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chairman Hahn. I have Dr. Dominic DeTavio, who's the president of Tarleton State University, and here's with me today. And after my presentation, Dr. DeTavio is going to give the highlights of the action plan that the university has implemented to improve its classroom space utilization scores. So he's going to do that after I go through the project presentation, if that's okay.
Very good. Welcome to both of you.
Okay. Tarleton State University is requesting coordinating board approval for the OA Grant Humanities Building Rehabilitation and Expansion Project. This project will address the 40-year-old OA Grant Humanities Building to provide modernized and expanded space for the growing liberal and fine arts program at Tarleton. Are you moving? Okay. Okay. The Grant Building is located in the southern portion of the Tarleton main campus, just southeast of the library building, as this map shows. This slide shows some particular data concerning this project and its funding. The total project budget is $13,671,700. The funding will be with bonds to be retired with funding from the Permanent University Fund. Estimated date of substantial completion of the project is June 2014. The north half of the existing Grant Building is 3 stories, while the south half is a single story, 1 story. This project will perform rehabilitation work in 4 large lecture rooms in the single-story portion, primarily to abate overhead asbestos-containing materials and then to provide new DDC controls for the HVAC system, both in the existing building and in the new addition. Excuse me. The project will also add 2 additional floors over the 1-story portion to provide modernized spaces for public relations and event management labs, a university writing center, media coverage studies, digital media studies and video podcast activities, student meeting and collaborative learning areas, the Dean of College of Liberal and Fine Arts suite, and the Department of Communication Studies suite. Work exterior to the building will include a new backup generator and underground electrical line for the building, and a plaza area around the western and southern portions of the building, and a tiered seating area east of the building as outdoor learning collaboration spaces. This is a perspective of the OA Grant Humanities Building with the 2-story addition in place. As this project is a class lab type facility, the project meets all applicable coordinating board project parameters. However, the Tarleton campus as a whole does not meet the overall space utilization efficiency scores because the classroom utilization scores do not meet coordinating board standards. The university has developed a plan of action to address the classroom utilization score and submitted the plan to the coordinating board, which I believe has been accepted. And again, I have Dr. DeTavio here to go through the highlights of the action plan that they've implemented to improve their classroom utilization scores.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have with me also Joe Standridge. He's the Associate Vice President for Facility Services on the Tarleton campus, and he's been actively involved.
Doctor, is your microphone on?
Oh, I'm sorry.
And you can pull it a little closer to you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also have with me Mr. Joe Standridge, who's the Associate Vice President for Facilities at Tarleton, and he's been actively involved in assisting us in developing the plan. And so if there are some questions about the details, he can assist us with that. I might note that the grant space itself allows us to demolish a 1938 building that is a old residence hall that's currently being used for residence, for office space, and for a variety of classroom types of purposes. And so that will assist us as we go forward on our space issue. And I might note, too, that the addition to the grant building will not erode the SU scores that we have because the new space is not adding 110 classrooms, which is the reason why we are currently not meeting our standards. Over the past year, we've taken a very intentional approach to how it is that we have been dealing with space allocation, and that's been reflected in the plan that we submitted to the board. Notably, what we've done is we put together a committee called Utilizing Space Efficiently, USE is its acronym, and that committee has been responsible for really putting the meat on the bones of the plan that we submitted to the board in February. What it does is it reduces our traditional classroom space by 11, and those 11 classrooms are then being converted to things that are needed more at Tarleton at this point in time that will help us meet our student success initiatives, putting in place spaces for things like supplemental instruction, some of the collaborative learning spaces that we do not have that are more necessary these days than some of the traditional classroom spaces that we've had. The other thing that we've done is we've changed our schedule. We've now added time to our Tuesday, Thursdays time slots. That's been a major turnover for us so that we have the ability to use some of those classes more effectively. We've relied on Texas Tech and UNT to provide us some guidance on some software programs that we think help us track our scores more effectively. And then what we're doing, again, at the guidance of Texas Tech particularly, is we're looking at the capacity issues in some of our classrooms. We may not have monitored those as closely as we should, so we've had some small classes in large rooms, and what we're doing now is requiring those rooms to be used much more effectively than in the past. And then the last thing that is happening at Tarleton is this past year we had a 6.5% enrollment increase this coming fall. We're expecting about a 7% enrollment increase, and that's a continuation of a trend that we've had for the last 3 or 4 years. And so the net effect is that we believe that the plan that we've put in place, taking those 11 classrooms offline, and the combination of enrollment increases, how we're dealing with capacity issues, by this fall, 2013, we expect that the SU score and our overall SU will be well within the standards established by the coordinating board. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Does staff have any comment? David? Okay.
Could I make a comment, Mr. Chairman? I'm not a voting member of this committee, but I like your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
You obviously didn't meet a couple of our standards and criteria, but you've come in here with a plausible explanation. I feel like you've dotted every I and crossed every T. I think this board is very conscious of the ever increasing rise in the cost of higher education. But having said that, we also understand the necessities of keeping our spaces and facilities current, and that's what appears as if you're doing. So I appreciate the fact that you've done your homework well.
Thank you,
and made
sir.
a good presentation, because I was ready to ask you some questions about the fact that you had not met a couple of our criteria, but good job.
Thank you.
Doctor, clearly the extra 2 stories that you're building there are going to be somewhat of a flexible space, it sounds like. How is the A&M system helping you meet the Texas Tech system helping you meet the challenge here? Are you going to use some of that flexible space for students on your campus to actually be participating online with another campus that has maybe a greater number of students, where they could actually audit a course or take a course that's not really on that campus in order to maximize the efficiency? Have you kind of thought about that in some of your strategies?
The Texas Tech system has been very helpful to us in identifying how it is that we more effectively address capacity issues, how it is that we track our scores. What we're doing as a system is that we're looking right now, in fact, there's a major initiative across the system to look at how it is that we can collaborate on a variety of different courses and programs to offer courses throughout the system. And in fact, there's a committee led by 2 presidents that is currently looking at that issue. And we expect in about the next 6 months to a year, we're going to have recommendations to bring forward on how to do that precisely for all 11 universities in the Texas A&M system.
Will you be sharing that with us?
I am sure we would be happy to, sir.
I'm going to compliment you on forward thinking, and I would ask that you share that with us so that we could use that as a benchmark to help with other systems, because that's the kind of forward thinking we really need to have going forward.
Thank you. We'll be happy to do that.
Questions? Doctor, I'd just like to know kind of what do you attribute the increase in your enrollment, and what areas has that increase been in predominantly?
The 2 largest areas that we've seen enrollment increases have been nursing, and we can attribute that specifically to a new nursing classroom building. that permitted us to increase the capacity of nurses that we could take into the program. It is by far the largest requested program that we have on the Tarleton campus for new freshmen coming in. I believe last fall, of 1,700 new freshmen, about 700 of them declared nursing as a major. Now, we cannot take nearly that number, but that shows you the demand. Another growth area, very large growth area, has been in animal science, in places like veterinary technology and wildlife management particularly. We have put in place a very deliberate strategy to meet the Closing the Gaps goals over the past 4 years, and have really focused intentionally on retention issues as well, and have just been much more systematic about communicating with potential new freshmen. And we've had a very, very high conversion rate as a result of that over the past 4 years. I believe our numbers have been up by 40% since 2010.
Excellent.
I could add one point, and you can tell me if this has changed, but Tarleton is one of those institutions that actually draws from counties across the state in the way many of our institutions don't. And I think most people don't realize that while there may not be large numbers from all across the state, but in fact the student body is very representative of many, many counties in Texas, and part of it is because of their great strength in agriculture, but in a number of other areas as well.
That's very true. We typically have upwards of 225, 230 of the Texas counties represented, and typically close to all 50 states represented as well.
Well, you know, I like that vision of reaching out beyond just your immediate area. And I agree with David. I see some institutions in this state that tend to think small, and they need to realize that, you know, these are state institutions that represents the entire state, and all the students should have an opportunity to attend your university and know about your university and what it has to offer. You guys are doing a lot of things real well, it appears to me. I'm not real familiar with your institution, but what little I've learned this morning is I like the word collaborate. I like the word innovative, being creative. I like the word being efficiency, increasing our efficiencies and how we operate our institutions. And so I think that's a whole lot of what this board is focusing on is improving what we're already doing real well and doing it even better.
Well, we were delighted to have you on the campus. We had Ms. Shepard there in the fall and had a wonderful visit with her, and any of you are welcome to come and see the good things that are going on.
Well, I'll just say, jumping into my committee, they have actually a large campus in Waco and a large campus in Fort Worth, too. So when you're talking about being very innovative and giving kids access, not just kids, adults, but they're doing some great things on those two campuses that really aren't, you know, in this report. So I'm very impressed with what they're doing in Tarleton.
And
Move approval.
There's no further discussion or comments. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Just one final question. How's the rodeo team doing?
We're #1 in the region, both in men and women, as a matter of fact, and we're looking forward to the national finals in Wyoming.
Excellent. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're proud of that.
Thank you, gentlemen. Agenda items 5A, 1, 3, 4, and 5 were on the consent agenda. Agenda item 5B is a report on facilities decisions and projects certified to meet the requirements of the expedited process for approval. This is an information item only. Are there any questions of staff? None. We'll move to item 5C. Is a presentation by Texas Southern University on future campus plans for the institution. Dr. John Rudley, President, and Mr. Tim Reichlich, is that correct? Executive Director of Facilities and Maintenance with Texas Southern, will be available to answer questions regarding the information in the presentation. Good morning. If your little red light is on, that means that
We're in good shape then?
live.
I promise not to take much time. The staff has already whipped me to make sure I only take 5 minutes. So I had about 30 slides, and they cut it down to 2. So we had to reconcile this morning, and we got it back to 5 or 6. So
We like pictures.
I believe one picture is worth 1,000 words. So let's look at the first slide, if you will. Would you push that? Texas Southern's campus has dramatically changed over the 5 years that we've been there. I've been there since 2008, 2009. This picture is basically shocks a lot of people in Houston because we didn't have grass growing for a long time. We didn't have flowers. We didn't have shrubbery. So we had a campaign to beautify the campus. And what you see in this picture is what we've done over the last 5 years. Now, I must tell you that we got some help from Hurricane Ike. We got, we had about $54 million in deferred maintenance costs that was developed by Carter Barons. When the hurricane hit, we had about $38 million in damage. So between Hurricane Ike and the FEMA refunds we got, the FEMA help, the state gave us support and insurance, we were able to do what you see here in terms of really take Texas Southern to the next level in terms of making sure it's a beautiful campus. At the end of the day, Texas Southern should look well enough to attract all types of students, black students, white students, Hispanic students. It should look like a place where kids want to come to school with their first impression. So that's what we've been doing for 5 years at Texas Southern. Let me show you the next slide, some of our planning initiatives. We want to increase enrollment at Texas Southern. We're at 9,700 students now. When we had open admissions in way before 2008, as you all know, I changed the admissions. There were no admission standards before 2008. It was essentially open, and I put in admission standards in 2009 and 10 from a 2.5 GPA the first 2009, and I moved it up to 2.5 in 2010. As a matter of fact, this last freshman class of 1,300 students, the average GPA for that 1,300 students is 3.0. So it tells us we can go out and attract better students if we just try, and we have done that. And so our planning focus is on increasing enrollment, of course. We're going to add campus housing. Also, what we call improved campus density is just simply recognizing the fact that I think TSU needs to grow to about 11,000 to 12,000 students from about 9,700 now. Strategically, we need to acquire land around the campus. As you all know, we're in the heart of the Third Ward, and we're almost kind of landlocked as far as I'm concerned. So we need to have a strategy that creates a buffer zone around the campus. Recently, a piece of property came available on the corner of one of our parking garages, and it was turned into a nightclub. Well, we don't want those kind of things to happen, so we would strategically buy property that becomes available to prevent that kind of stuff from happening. And then finally, we've divided our campus boundaries. We put in a fencing system, and I call it the Rice University type fencing system, where it doesn't look intrusive, it doesn't look unpleasant, it has vines growing on it, but at the end of the day, we have to control our borders. And so this fencing around the campus makes it allowable for us to control who comes on our campus and who leaves our campus. And so we're doing that in a very orderly fashion, and the community has not reacted negatively to that either. So it looks very nice. Vines are growing on it, so we're really happy with the project. We started doing quadrants 4 years ago. We did north, south, east, and west. And finally, when we had enough money, we were able to put together at each summer a project that would take care of one of the quadrants. So after 5 years, we basically got the campus buttoned up. The next slide, please. Now, we're taking our guidelines from at least 4 master plans that the university had going back to 1998. Page Southern Page had a master plan developing for TSU in 1998, Hermes in 2001 and 2006, Burnett in 2006 as well, a landscaping plan, and then we had most recent Broadus and Associates. So based on those ideas, and you know, a master plan is interesting because the experts come to your office and they ask you, what do you think you ought to do? You pay them about, $300,000, and they write down what you tell them to do, and that's your master plan. So I'm aware of how that works, and I'm sure you are too. But just to say, we're going to be cost effective. We're not going to really commission any more master plans. We'll take the best ideas from what we already have. The next slide, please. This is the overview of our campus. We have 158 acres, and we're going to have some subsets of this slide, but basically you can't read those legends. But in the legend, the yellow would be buildings under construction. The iron fencing is in black. The current buildings are the university's colors, which are maroon. And proposed buildings would be in black as well, and I'll go through some of those with you. And then there's proposed property acquisitions in blue, and then buildings scheduled to be demolished are in red. We also have, so we'll move into, I know this is hard to read, and so we've broken it out by quadrants. This is the way we approach our planning. Next slide, I'll show you what we're talking about. In the science and arts quadrant A, now, remember this is a compilation of recommendations from at least 4 master plan experts. But currently in this quadrant, we have a technology building that was funded by the state, $35 million. Hurricane Ike actually helped move that project up because it was an old building that needed to be replaced. And once the hurricane came and really tore it up, we just expedited the construction of that building on the same site. So in about January 2014, we'll see a new technology building at Texas Southern. Very, very nice looking building. If you see, look up the top right, it adds to what we're doing about making the university attractive to students, and it plays into the need to have STEM emphasized on our campus. As a matter of fact, we're going to put our airway sciences program in that building. I know you don't know this. We have 25 pilots who are currently flying with Continental Airlines that came out of TSU Airway Sciences program. We actually have flight simulators in the whole 9 yards. And we also have a high school, Sterling High School, that's a magnet school that specializes in aviation. So we're able to promote that program in that new building along with our other programs. I think it's pretty exciting for Texas Southern. Next slide. Quadrant B, we have a proposed library on the board. I think you all know we have a 57-year-old library that needs to be replaced. It's probably the oldest library in the state, and we made that our #1 request. But you see it plays right into the academic corridor. All those buildings on both the right and the left are the academic buildings on the campus. So that new library will add a new feature for us to also be able to track students. Like I said before, the freshman class this year had a 3.0 GPA, so we got better students, and better students expect to see a library that's representative of a quality institution. Next slide, please.
Can you go back to that library?
Sure.
Does that library already have a name, or is that the old library's name?
Robert Terry Library.
Was that the old library?
Yes.
Okay.
Robert Terry.
So you're actually talking about replacing it?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. You know, the library that you and I studied in is not the library of the future right now. So have you got some input on how to design a library? So much of the files are now digital. It's not like, you check a book out in that regard.
Yeah, we studied about 4, what we call, they don't call them libraries anymore, they call them learning centers. And with the learning center concept, you're able now to program those buildings to address the high-tech, we call them millennium kids now, their requirements. So this building will be, we call it a library, but it's really going to be a learning center, and it will address what the current students' needs are with respect to digitization and learning online.
And where are you at in the design or building phase of this?
We have selected 3 universities we looked at already as models. We don't have the funding for it at this point. Okay. We just know that the building has, for example, structural defects in the current one we have. It's so much so we've had to move the books around because it's a safety issue with respect to the stacks and the weight. And so we've had that problem for a long time. So we know that we've looked at 4 other libraries. The most impressive library I've seen in that list comes from Morgan State. It's a historically black college in Maryland, and we've seen at least 4 that we'd like to model our new library after.
And on your priority list, where is this? Is this like number 3, number 4?
It is #1.
This is your #1 project that has yet to be funded?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
What time frame are you hoping to have that move forward?
Well, if the legislature approves the TRBs, and hopefully we're on that list, if it's approved, we'll put it right into. It'll be like the shovel. It won't be shovel ready, but we'll get it there as quickly as we can.
You're ready to start action.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Next slide is the residential, and this is an interesting project as well. As you hear what I'm talking about in terms of Texas Southern, you see how we're starting to really move the campus forward. And we're not dealing with the past, we're dealing with the future. And so we went out and looked at our dormitories, and now, after 3 years, we were able to go to the federal government, and they have a historically black college capital financing program. And we were able to get a loan from that program, $65 million, to build a 800-bed dormitory. We'll put women on one side, men on the other side, and we'll deal with making sure that kids who come to our university have an adequate space to live and a decent place to live as well. And plus, it'll be very, very impressive. You know, students now, when they select a university, first thing they want to see is the dormitories. And so we want to make sure that that's not going to be something that's going to turn them off. So this new dormitory, the special capital financing program is for HBCUs, and we got a 2.6% interest rate on those bonds. I mean, that's almost like free money. But we took advantage of a special program, so we'll incorporate that building. It's already it's been architects been selected, construction companies been selected. Now we're just fighting over the last piece, and that would be where to put a cafeteria. But all in all, we expect that thing to be done in about a year and a half. So that'll be a wonderful addition to Texas Southern. We have 1,300 students living on campus now, and this is going to add another 800. And you all know that you can get your graduation rate up if you become more of a residential-based campus instead of a commuter campus. And so that's what we're doing here at Texas Southern. So all these steps, I think, are taking us in the right direction, and that's a building that's already been funded. We're going to demolish, if you look in the residential quarter, the buildings on the left, those are old buildings, and we'll demolish those, and we'll begin the process for continue trying to find a way to add more dormitories to TSU. Next slide, please.
Quick question.
Getting toward the end, too. Yes.
I'm sorry, quick question on the dorm. Is that apartment-style housing, or is that going to be traditional dormitories?
Oh, traditional.
Traditional.
I'm not really in apartment style. I'm old enough now. I think apartment styles are fine, but they go a little bit too far as I'm concerned. And this is a freshman dorm, freshman only. So I want them to have the same experience you and I had in the dormitory. I don't want to give them too much luxury. I'll give the luxury to the juniors and seniors when they've proven that they can handle themselves. But we need to have more control on our freshman population, and that's what that dorm will be designed to do.
Dr. Rudley, are you giving any thought to incorporating some of your student support services within your dormitory environments, counseling, tutoring, any of those types of things that I've begun to see, or how are you trying to get these freshmen who you want to you want to attract, and of course you want to retain them too.
Yes. And
making sure that you retain these high quality students that you're obviously beginning to get headed your direction.
Yes, and that's
strategy.
That's a great question. I'll show you. This thing isn't working, but if you look at the bottom right, we have what is called the Urban Academic Village, and we see 3 years ago we got a $2.8 million grant from the Houston Endowment. And that grant was designed to bring 390 kids into a dormitory. These inner city kids from Houston and wherever, put them in one dormitory. We give them 5 faculty that stay with them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They actually live in the Urban Academic Village. They have the tutoring that you mentioned as well. So we have given them more support for this new program. So the new dormitory will have the same features as the Urban Academic Village. We have learned our lessons with this Urban Academic Village, the do's and the don'ts. But we've learned more about how to handle kids who come really unprepared. And so you're right, the tutoring we're giving them tutoring. We have special federal funds for this tutoring part. We have student mentors. We take some of our best students, and they actually mentor these kids in the Urban Academic Village. We'll use the same roadmap for the new freshmen that enter into the new dormitory, and we will continue that program.
Do those faculty members get combat pay?
They get a stipend, that's for sure. And I wondered about that too, but a lot of them are looking at it from the standpoint of writing some research papers and doing research on what does it take. We all know we're having a problem with the K through 12 system, especially in inner cities, it's not the best in the world. It's not as good as when we were going to school. So what's the problem? What's the deal? So they're doing the research, asking these kids, what does it take? I mean, what are the things that are motivating you, and what do we need to do to make sure you're successful in school? We're learning for things, for example, kids leave school because they have to use their resources to take care of mom and dad back home. I mean, that's something we really never thought about, but we have an issue with the financing, and I'm glad you're taking up the issue of the cost of education. It is something that is turning these kids around, and so we have to figure out how to bridge that gap and keep education accessible and affordable to them. But we're learning. That's what I'm saying. We're learning the do's and the don'ts from this crowd, and they need social enhancements. You know, we take the Urban Academic Village to the museums. We take our buses and we take them down to Houston, and we expose them to a lot of cultural events. We even took them to an Astros game. How many kids have never been to a professional facility in their life? So these are some of the things we're doing to give them culture and experiences as well. Hopefully that'll tie them into the education process, and they'll see the benefit of going to the end of this process. That's a very good question, and we have really been working very hard on that to make sure these kids get the support they need.
One other brief question, and John, this is a little bit off the subject, but I'd like to take this opportunity to just ask you a question. One of the areas that we're seeing that we're falling woefully behind in is in terms of bringing up African American males, and particularly when we look at our Closing the Gap initiatives. And I know this is a little bit off the subject, but I don't have the opportunity to ask you this question too often, so I'm going to take this opportunity. And I have a lot of respect for what you've done and what you are doing. Can you give us some ideas of what the coordinating board or what we could be doing to improve that? I mean,
yes.
To me, that's something. You know, we don't want to focus necessarily all on the problem without having a real plausible solution in terms of what we can do to bring African American males up to the levels that we're seeing other. And this is not meant to be critical.
No,
it's meant to be just point out a problem and see what we can do collectively to make it go away. And you're obviously addressing a lot of that, whether you realize it or not. And I think you do. And it's going to take a lot of time. But what can we do better? Where's the problem?
Well, the coordinating board has funded almost, I say, $500,000 in about 6 grants to Texas Southern recently. And each one of those grants is helping, like the mentoring program where I said we have our honor students actually mentoring some of the kids in the Urban Academic Village. We're paying them, the honor students, a stipend to do that, and you are helping with that. And as I say, we're doing this all trying to find the magic bullet. It's like the God particle everybody discovered in recently in medicine. I mean, what is the magic bullet that turns these kids around? So we have at least 5 programs from the coordinating board that we're working on. So you are helping from that standpoint. Well, I can say to you that one thing that we're doing that's unique at Texas Southern, we created what we call a Collegiate 100. And there's an organization called the 100 Black Men in this country. They're all over the country, and they're well-to-do guys who want to give back to the community. You know, they've always said, well, African American males have been absent and not really contributed to the lives of these young men. Well, this group of men around the country are trying to change that. So what we did, we have a chapter of Collegiate 100. We have selected 100 of the best young men you can find anywhere, and we have put them in the Collegiate 100. We also have a Collegiate 100 Women that does the same thing. And they are the best and the brightest, and we work with them on a one-on-one basis with programs, and they give back to their own community. So that program, to me, is unique. We have the largest chapter of the 100 Black men and women in the nation on our campus. And so that cadre, when they walk around my campus, they're wearing suits and ties. The ladies are dressed like they're getting ready to go to get a job interview. And this culture changes. When other kids see them, they say, oh, they're part of the Collegiate 100. How can I be a part of that? So the other kids are picking up on it. Now everybody's starting to dress. the way they should dress. Our kids come from inner city schools. They don't know how to dress when they go to a college campus. So now they're learning how to dress through their role models. So, like I said, it's been a wonderful experience for us to be able to see if we can have an impact on these kids' life. And I'm telling you, we're having a great impact. About 4 or 5 of those kids in Cleveland 100 are getting ready to go to Ivy League schools when they leave TSU. They're such I guess, a quality. You can't find many young men like that. So they're getting all kinds of offers from graduate schools, Columbia and places like that. So it's working. Some of them want to go to medical school, and part of that program is to really educate these kids on the possibilities for themselves. All these kids come to us with families who really don't have a 360 degree of possibilities. So when you ask the young man, what do you want to be? I want to be a basketball player. Well, what do you want to be? Well, I want to be a rapper. No. You can be a lawyer. You can be a doctor. You can be in health services. So we teach them of the 10 programs, academic programs. We start saying, let's step back. We have a freshman, what we call a freshman seminar class. So 1 hour class is required for all these students, freshmen, and it helps them figure out what they can be good at. And so with that 1 hour, we're exposing kids to what is possible for them. And so with the Collegiate 100, we're able to push those kids along. And so you can see the dynamics are changing because kids talk to each other. You got this social media going on. If you say something bad, they all know about it, 9,700 students in 1 second. If you say something good, the same thing happens. So when the good news gets out there and they start telling the story of, girl, I think, conversation, young girl, I thought I was going to be in criminal justice, but I decided I want to be a lawyer. So I'm going to go to Thurgood Marshall and check it out tomorrow. See, that's the kind of culture you have to start getting kids to think about so they can see themselves as being successful. I'm having fun down there. Let me finish.
Your enthusiasm is pretty obvious.
Well, thank you. We're changing lives, and the thing about Texas Southern, I always tell some of the folks, really think about Texas Southern. What university in this country is a doctoral research institution, classification, but had an open admissions policy for over 20 years? That dynamic is tremendous. It's too much of a contradiction. So we changed the bottom part of that, but over the years, we've had to deal with the lack of focus. So now we're focusing on what we think is really important. And a university that produces a Barbara Jordan and a Mickey Leland and a Michael Strahan, who I'm going to offer an honorary doctorate in May, and he's going to help me hopefully raise some more money on this last chart, the athletic quadrant. Would you go to the last chart? I've got George Foreman and Michael Strahan working with me to try to come up with how to improve the athletic facility on the campus. But Michael Strahan is the kind of guy that came from Texas Southern University, and you wonder, how did that happen? Well, it's been happening. So our job now is to enhance the experience so more kids can have the opportunity to meet their goals in terms of being able to go into the workforce, get a great job, take care of their families, and make sure they start the generation where their kids will go to college as well. Because still, we're dealing with too many kids who are first-generation college students. That's the problem. You would have thought we got past that, but we have too many kids at TSU that are first time in college, first generation kids. So we've got it. Great story. That last slide. Let me show you that last slide there. I told you I wasn't going to go too long, but that last slide is also. You got it? No? There you go. So one picture is worth 1,000 words. So I cheated on this and I put about 8 little pictures in there. But if you can see, that doesn't look like any stereotype of what you thought Texas Southern looked like 10 years ago. That's any university in the country. And so we're really proud of what we're doing. That young lady on the bottom right, we recruited her. She's the first student I recruited at TSU, put her in the honors college. She'll be going to law school at the University of Houston next year. So we're happy about this.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your presentation. Are there any other comments? Come back again.
Thank you.
This is a breath of fresh air.
I'd like to bring some of the Collegiate 100 back up here if I could.
Please do.
I'll do that. All right.
I had one comment real fast. I've had the opportunity to work with y'all's student regent on several occasions this year. I just want to commend y'all on the job he's done. He's an incredible guy, very driven.
Well, Juan is part of the new vanguard. I mean, some of my students are telling me, the ones who just got jobs in the corporate world, They say when they start speaking and they have something to say in their companies, people are surprised. They say, "What school did you come from?" And they say Texas Southern, and people are surprised. But Juan is the kind of students that we're talking about. He's a non-traditional student for the group, and he's a Hispanic student. He decided he wanted to move his school forward. And so he said, I know it's supposed to be a historically black college. He said, but this is my college too. So we have that competition going on, and Juan is a very good representative of Texas Southern University, and we have a lot of great kids that are on our campus now.
Again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, agenda item 5D is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the review of accountability group's criteria. We have pulled this item until after the legislative session, since there is a possibility of new institutions being created. Agenda item 5E is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the higher education impact statements for the 83rd Texas Legislature. This committee did not have any impact statements. The Committee on Academic and Workforce Success has 2 impact statements today that will be considered at their meeting this afternoon. Agenda item 5F is an update on the coordinating board's priorities for the 83rd Texas legislative session. Dom.
Morning.
You made it.
I made it.
All right.
I drew the short straw, apparently.
All right. John Wyatt, Assistant Director of External Relations, and Dominic Chavis, Senior Director of External Relations, will provide information to the committee. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. You should have in front of you what will be for this presentation. We'll be working off the supplemental materials. You should have this in front of you just to make sure you have everything that you need before we get started. You should have a spreadsheet that looks like this with budget numbers. It's entitled Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, CSSB House, and SB1 in Gross Senate. You should also have a document that at the top says side-by-side comparison of House appropriations, Senate Bill 1 versus Senate engrossed Senate Bill 1. You will have a very colorful spreadsheet, one-pager. There's no title on it, but you can't miss it. And then finally, you'll have a document titled at the top, Recommendations to the 83rd Texas Legislature. So hopefully you have all those documents. If not, we'll get those to you. The way we'll do this is I'm going to first turn it over to John Wyatt, who's going to walk you through the budget and where we stand today relative to both chambers and most of our major budget priorities. At that point, we'll turn it over to Gary Johnson, who's going to talk about the formula funding piece, and then I'll close with the discussion of the legislative recommendation and policy issues that we have, and we can certainly take questions as they arise. We ready? All right, John.
Thank you and good morning. Again, John Wyatt, Assistant Director of External Relations for Fiscal Analysis. First, I'll give some top-line perspective, and then we'll get into the documents that you have in front of you. As you know, SB1 and HB1 are the General Appropriations Acts for the Senate and the House. Each biennium, the Senate and the House take turns over whose bill will serve as the vehicle for enacting the budget. And this biennium, it's the Senate's turn. So SB1 will be the bill that will ultimately become the state budget. On March 20th, the full Senate voted out its version of SB1, so that was approved. The Senate version appropriates a total of about $16.8 billion in all funds. All funds include general revenue dedicated, federal funds, and then any other funds, such as private grants. So of that $16.8 billion all funds total, about $14.6 billion is general revenue and general revenue dedicated. And that's the total for higher education in its entirety. And Included in that amount is an increase of about $571.9 million in general revenue for formula funding, which Gary will discuss after I'm done. Also included in the Senate bill is about an increase of about 9.3% in all funds for the coordinating board. That includes $192.2 million, or about a 16.8% increase in GR and GRD funds for the biennium. So that's the Senate bill. On March 21st, last week, the House Appropriations Committee took Senate Bill 1 and substituted in the House budget for its version of the appropriations bill. We expect that the House committee substitute will be on the floor this next week. We expect late next week to be on the floor. The House committee substitute appropriates a total of $16.2 billion in all funds and $14 billion in general revenue and general revenue dedicated for higher education. That amount includes an increase of $266.7 million in general revenue for formula funding. It also includes $110.8 million, or a 12.5% increase in all funds to the coordinating board, and a $233.9 million increase in GR and GRD funds over the current biennium. So that's kind of the top line of where we are. I'd like to walk you through a couple of documents. The first document is the spreadsheet that you should have in front of you that shows the coordinating board's budget by budget strategy. This shows both the House and the Senate versions. Looking at this document, to the left, that first column is each budget strategy here at the coordinating board. The next column is the 2012 through 2013 base. This is the amount that we actually received in 12-13. This was also the amount that was in the introduced versions of the appropriations bills. LBB and the legislature decided that their introduced bills would be based on the 12-13 numbers as opposed to our LAR. The next column, 2014-15 THECB LAR, those are the amounts that we requested in our LAR, and they also include our exceptional item requests. So that pink column shows, or those pink columns show the 14-15 current House version of the appropriations bill. And then those next two columns after the numbers show the percentage difference House versus the 12-13 base and House versus our legislative appropriations request. The green columns to the right of that follow the same format for the Senate. So the amount that is in the Senate engrossed version would actually pass the Senate. And then the percentage differences, Senate versus the 12-13 base, and then Senate versus our legislative appropriations request. At the very end of that document are notes which describe for each budget strategy where there was some significant difference, why that is. And I'd be happy to address any particular budget strategy that you might have a question on. If the next document I'm going to refer to might be more helpful to you, and this is the side-by-side comparison of House Appropriations Committee substitute to SB1 versus Senate engrossed SB1. And this document shows for, it's a side-by-side comparison which only highlights those strategies that were changed from the introduced versions of the bills. So this is where the legislature decided to add or subtract funding to the introduced version of the bill. We're very happy that the legislature decided to prioritize in adding funding to the introduced versions our two biggest priorities, the board's two biggest priorities, which are Texas Grant and then funding for graduate medical education. If you look at the bottom of that first page, the House version of the appropriations bill added $150 million to Texas Grant. That's a $25 million increase over the current biennial total, and will serve about 87% of the newly eligible students entering Texas Grant in the coming biennium. Now, it will do so at the award amounts of $5,000 per student at universities and $1,325 for students at community colleges. The board had made an exceptional item request of $163.7 million, and as you see, the House came fairly close to that. The Senate version added $114.7 million to Texas Grant. That's the box to the right, about a 20% increase over the current total. We estimate that will serve 80% of newly eligible students in Texas Grant, again at those $5,000 and $1,325 award amounts. If you go on to the next page. The House also decided to add to a couple of other of our financial aid strategies. They added $15 million, about a 9% increase to TEG, the tuition equalization grants. They added $5 million, or about 14%, to the TEOG, the Texas Educational Opportunity Grants, which go to community college students. If you'll go down to B1.7, that's the Teach for Texas loan repayment program, which was also an area where we had an exceptional item request. The House added $2 million to Teach for Texas, about a 200% increase over the current biennium, for a total of $3 million for Teach for Texas. Our exceptional item request was for $9 million. The Senate added $3.9 million for a biennial total of $4.9 million. Both the House and the Senate chose to add funding to the engineering recruitment program, which was also an exceptional item request of the agency, at $500,000. If you look at Goal C, the Norman Hackerman Advanced Research Program, the House added $2 million to the current $1 million in that program, so for a total of $3 million. The Senate added $1 million for a total of $2 million. Our exceptional item request was for $8 million. And then if you look under Goal D, the Family Practice Residency Program, the board had an exceptional item request for an additional $14 million in that program. The House chose to add $8.5 million, about a 150% increase. The Senate added $5.8 million, or about a 104% increase to that program. One thing I'll highlight in terms of a reduction that we took, if you go to page 3, Goal F, F1.1 is developmental education. Both the Senate and the House required the coordinating board to transfer $1.2 million per year, so a total of $2.4 million in the biennium, from that strategy to the new Mathways project at UT Austin. This was advocated by the Texas Association of Community Colleges and was done with the consent of the board on the condition that the commissioner or his designee serve on the advisory board of the new Mathways project. This project, it does support developmental education, so it is still for the purpose of developmental education, but will be done through this specific program at UT. If you go to the bottom of the page, Article 3, Key Riders, you may recall that the board recommended a couple of riders be added to our appropriations bill pattern. We did receive a rider that would give us authority to transfer unexpended funds in the Texas Armed Services Scholarship Program into the Texas Grant Program. This is as you know, TASP is fairly undersubscribed, and this will allow us to use those balances to provide financial aid through Texas Grant. There is also an exceptional, there's actually a contingency rider that was included in both bills for graduate medical education. The board had requested $11.5 million as an exceptional item request for GME. The House version included a $10 million contingency rider, and the Senate included an $11.5 million contingency rider. Now, those appropriations are contingent on the enactment of legislation, which in the Senate is SB 143. That is actually being heard in committee today.
What is the bill on the House side?
I don't know offhand, but we do have Representative Branch introduced our GME legislation on the House side.
Yeah, Representative Branch, Chairman Branch has filed House Bill 3692, which also creates a program that can be used that if money is found, that it would execute these dollars and allow us to allocate them for this purpose.
And in looking at the whole GME issue here, it looks like I thought we had made a recommendation for a reduction in funding of the JAMP program, but instead both houses seem to be taking the opposite approach of expanding it. What did they know that we didn't know?
That is correct. We did make that recommendation as a way of funding our GME request. What happened was the LBB decided that the introduced versions of these bills would be based solely on the 1213 appropriation. So the shifting among budget strategies that we recommended in our LAR was not in the introduced version of the bill. They started from a framework of not having that reduction, and then they decided that JAMP was something that they wanted to invest additional funding in. Again, the other thing is that we were required in our LAR to maintain the 1213 base in how we allocated our funding. The legislature added money above and beyond the 1213 base as they were considering the bills, so they weren't forced to make the same kind of trade-offs that we were.
But we know that JAMP program was undersubscribed, so could we, similar to what they did with the TASSP, have a contingency in there that those funds could be used for other GME activities if they're undersubscribed?
That rider does not exist now. We do have generalized authority to transfer funding between programs. I believe that's a 20% cap on how much we can transfer. But the kind of rider you mentioned is not in the bill currently.
Okay. So the reason to put this rider in here is to be able to put more than 20% transferred into the Texas grant program if it's undersubscribed like it has been historically.
That is correct, sir. And the issue, and I believe TASP is the only budget strategy where we have this, is that the balances we anticipate, even with our executing our full authority to transfer, we would not be able to transfer all that unused funding to Texas grant.
Have we been able to point out to the two chairmen this discrepancy in the JAMP funding and its subscription and explore opportunities for more flexibility on that?
We did fully explain to the committees when we made our initial LAR request to transfer the money out of JAMP the issues we were having with JAMP. JAMP is a very popular program, and the legislature decided it was worthy of further investment.
Okay, thank you.
And then I'll just finish by noting that on page 4 are just some Article 11 riders. Article 11 it says Article 11 key riders. Article 11 is basically the wish list in the bill. Something that is in Article 11 is something that the legislature identifies as a priority but is not funding at this time. So if something is in Article 11, it will not end up in the final bill unless during the conference committee they decide to move it out of Article 11 and into Article 3. And so you can see that there are a few of our exceptional item requests were included in Article 11. And then those last strategies are simply, we had some strategies that were transferred from the coordinating board to another agency. Our Alzheimer's Disease Center budget strategy was transferred to the University of Texas system. And the African American Museum budget strategy in the House version was moved to the University of Texas at Dallas budget. And for that, we have traditionally contracted with UTD, and that was a recommendation of the coordinating board that it be transferred. And then those final budget strategies were not funded in either the 12-13 biennium or in the recommended bills. And that's my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So if where this is where we are now.
Yes, sir.
And then ultimately it will be worked out in conference as to what the final outcome will be. Is it?
Yes, sir. There's still the Senate has adopted SB 1, so the Senate is done in terms of the floor. The House will consider next week the appropriations bills. So there's certain to be many amendments. There's certain to be a fair amount of debate on the floor about the bill. Once they have passed it, then the conference will be appointed. It'll be 5 members from the Senate, 5 members from the House, and they will work out the final numbers.
Okay.
So with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Gary Johnson, who's going to talk about the formula funding piece of the budget.
One page, colorful page. I'll be talking from that. There's 4 sections on here, and on this page, we'll start out with the health-related institutions on top. The formulas for the health-related institution, there's 5 that are listed here. We started out, both the House and Senate started out at different points. The House introduced bill was $1.65 billion. The Senate bill was $1.7 billion. And then to the right of that, you'll see these committee substitutes. As John said, the Senate has finished with their budget bill. So if you go to the far right, the Senate has moved up to $1.8 billion for health-related institutions, which is a 17% increase over their 12 and 13 biennium amounts. And then you can see by strategy, the majority of the money goes into instruction and operations funds, and they've increased it $205 million from the 12-13 amount. And for each one of those, the House is a little bit less, but they're not finished with their budget yet. But they're at $1.7 billion. They've added $168 million above the 12-13 base, which is 11% increase. The next section is general academic institutions. We started out the House and Senate bills. Again, they were a little different. They both had over $100 million increase in the introduced version. But if you move to the right, all the way to the right, the Senate committee substitute has added $346 million to above the 12-13 base, the majority of that going into instruction and operations. The outcomes-based funding, as you see, there's no appropriation has been made for the universities for outcomes-based funding in the Senate or in the House. The House is not finished with their budget, but the Senate has, and there is not a rider in Article 11 for implementing outcomes-based funding for the universities at this time.
And that, if I could follow on to that, Gary, that is correct. So the Senate adopted bill has nothing regarding outcomes-based funding for universities. It was not included either in Article 3 or in Article 11. The current status in the House for universities is that there is an Article 11 rider to implement outcomes-based funding for universities. But again, because it's currently in Article 11, it won't become operative unless it is moved into Article 3, and that is something that would most likely be done in the conference committee if it is to be done.
And so really for the universities, their funding formula, the way it is right now, there is no change other than they've increased the amounts for growth and for increase in costs. So there is no change in their formula. The next section is is the TSTC and Lamar State Colleges, and for the TSTC, both the House and the Senate version now has allocated the funds based on the value-added model that the board recommended. So there is a new rider that has been added to both the House and the Senate version, which describes the value-added model and how it is to be implemented. It also, both bills also instruct the coordinating board to continue to work with TSTC to refine the value-added model and to present recommendations to the Legislative Budget Board for next session for those changes to be implemented. TSTC received some significant increases in their funding. In the House side, as you see, they're the only strategy or sector that the House currently is higher than the Senate. The House added, in addition to the 3% that they added to formula funding for all sectors, they also added an additional $15 million to TSTC for instruction and operations above the. So the last one is the community college, and here we have differences between where we are now with the House and the Senate. When the Senate passed theirs, they followed the board's recommendation, and they put 10% of the formula funding, moved it from enrollment to success points. So the $174 million in the community college Senate bill is for outcomes-based funding, which we're calling student success. So you see that there's a reduction in instruction and administration in the Senate side of $162 million, but overall funding is increased $58 million over the 12-13 base, which is 3.3% increase. They also included the base funding, $1 million for the biennium for all 50 districts. So, and that will make a significant increase for the very small schools. So instead of getting a small school supplement of $250,000, some of the schools up to 30% of their funding will be from that base funding amount and not from enrollment or outcomes. So I think that will really help the very small community college districts. It won't make a really big difference to Dallas and Austin and Houston, but it will for the small ones. On the House side, currently their bill has a rider in Article 11 which implements outcomes funding, but at 10% of the instruction and operation amount. But the current bill has their formula funding and their small school supplement in there just the way it was in 12-13. So they haven't implemented any change there, but that's still an option.
Gary or John, could you say something about the community college request that the success points be allocated, be really based on an institution-by-institution basis, and that they compete for their own dollars? Where is that at this point?
There is a rider. I'm not sure, is it in Article 3 in?
There is an article, I believe it's actually in Article 3 in the House version, and I believe the Senate version, which would require the coordinating board and the community colleges during the interim to look at, for the 16-17 budget, basing their funding on how much each institution increases their performance on student success, as opposed to basing it on allocating funding among the institutions based on their student success points. And so that's a requirement that we work with the institution to come up with a proposal for how that would work in the 16-17 budget.
And if I understand their concern correctly, and I've heard this from at least one university as well, is that if all the dollars are distributed based upon points across schools, an institution can possibly actually show great improvement but actually not receive any dollars from the success points. They don't have a way to implement this model yet. Thus, they would like to talk about it. But that's their real concern, is that they actually be able to improve and see dollars rather than having to not knowing how things will play out with other schools. And if other schools are more successful and simply larger and more successful, that could mean their efforts would go unrewarded.
As far as the outcomes-based funding, at this point, you indicate neither the House or the Senate have really addressed that as far as moving forward towards it. Where do the chancellors and presidents of all the major universities stand?
That's what I want to know.
We actually, and if we haven't provided, we will send these. Some of this has been happening in real time. I believe both Chancellor Sharp and all the A&M institutions, as well as Chancellor Figueroa and all the UT institutions, as well as a number of the independents. I don't want to say all of them because I'm trying to remember from memory here, but a large majority of the universities actually submitted a letter to the governor saying they support, in various terminology, either the proposal specifically or the concept, and that it is the right time to move towards an outcomes-based funding system. So those letters, I believe, were sent. I've lost track of time. Maybe it was late last week.
Last week or so.
Again, I don't want to say it was every single institution because there may have been one or two that did not. But the University of Houston.
How about University of Houston, Texas Tech?
Yes.
Texas
Yes.
State. All of those.
The majors, yes. There's just one or two that I can't recall off the top of my head, but we'll provide those and I'll get that information for you. But they have all formally submitted that to the governor's office. It's been widely circulated that they are in support of at a minimum the movement towards outcomes-based funding, but many specifically outlined saying this proposal for the universities.
And this is the third session we've really started or been discussing this, so the institutions are aware that we are recommending that from an outcomes-based model that we move towards it. So what is the reluctance on the part of the legislature to address this?
Well, one thing, if I kind of capture, because there are a lot of moving parts in where it is and where it's not, in Article 11, Article 3, what I would say is this: at this point in time, the conversation on outcomes-based funding is still alive. I don't want anyone to leave this meeting thinking that somehow one component or the other is no longer in play. They are in various stages of the budget, but again, so long as they, for example, the universities and as long as they're in Article 11, they become part of the negotiated budget conversation at the end of session. And so at this point, it's still a lot of movement. We will see what the House does next week. But at this point, every single one of the models that you've recommended, whether it be the value added, the student success points for community colleges, or the outcomes-based model for universities, they are all in some form or fashion in the conversation for the budget. In terms of the reluctance, there's still, again, it's helping educate 180 some odd, 150 some odd legislators about the models, and there's a lot of legislators who are still not familiar with it. We've been working as hard as we can to help educate about the metrics, what they mean, what the impacts are. It is still a major change, and major change takes a lot of inertia to get over the hump. But we've made some serious progress. I think those letters from the universities will be helpful. But it's an ongoing conversation, and over the next month or so, hopefully we can continue to push through.
So is the highest probability, and I apologize, this Article 3 and Article 11 thing. So as long as it's in there, when it goes to the conference committee, doesn't that then seem like the highest probable place that it would be seriously considered?
Yes.
And that gives you a more defined place to make that case?
Yes, I think that would be true. I mean, again, you would be, at that point, you're talking about 10 members, 5 leaders from both the House and Senate that are going to negotiate. But again, just not on this, but on every element of the budget where there's some disagreement. But that's where the conversation, I think, again, becomes more focused. And so I think it's about keeping the conversation alive. And, so long as those things stay in the conversation in Article 11, that conversation's alive, and you have another month and a half or so to continue to talk about, not only we've talked about this for 3 years, these are what the metrics are, helping allay any members' concerns about what they've heard or what they think they know about the proposal, which we continue to do almost on a daily basis. So we're hopeful that as long as the conversation's still going, the prospects are still there that we can move to outcomes for all three sectors.
But if it's not in either bill, is it realistic that that's really alive, or is it alive because it's on life support?
Well, and just to clarify status, if you take the three sectors, so the TSTCs, the return value model is in Article 3 in both bills.
Right.
So that is in a very strong position
I'm talking about
to be
just
enacted.
general academic institutions.
With the general academics, you have nothing in the Senate version, and you have an Article 11 rider in the House version. Now, as I mentioned, Article 11 is the wish list. Unless a decision is made to move that from Article 11 to Article 3, it will not end up taking effect. But as Dom said, the fact that it's in Article 11 keeps it alive. And it is something that in the conference committee, any member could say, I want to move this to Article 3, and then there would have to be a decision at that point.
In a conference committee.
Yes, sir.
When are a little education for me here, when is it determined who the members are that are part of that conference committee?
It will likely be immediately following the passage, well, I say immediately, once the House finishes their decision on the budget, which I think is scheduled for April 4th. Thursday, April 4th is the date I think they've scheduled for the to hear it on the House floor. At that point, the House will identify the 5 leaders. Typically, it'll be obviously the two chairmen for the budget and finance committees, and then some key players on the budget and finance. They usually try to represent each sector, whoever participates. So whoever's working on health and human services, they'd like to have involved in the conversation, education, et cetera. So those will come pretty quickly after the House passes their budget. Yep.
But the fact of the matter is, we can within reason anticipate pretty much who some of these people are going to be, because they're going to be the leaders in both chambers.
Yes.
It's going to be the people of influence that's going to ultimately weigh in on this thing.
Yeah, so you could probably we'd probably sit down and come up with a short list of who the likely players would be, yes.
Any other questions?
Yeah. So on the health-related institutions, there's an extra $10 million, 10.9 and 4.6 regarding GME, but there's a huge increase in instruction and operations of 120 and 205 million. Our focus was on the GME side of that. How come so much was devoted to instruction and operations and so little to GME? Or am I reading that wrong?
No, it's the dollar. The dollar amount that you're saying is correct. The Senate actually, if you look at the percentage change, the Senate actually increased GME 24%, and only an increase instruction operation 22%. But it is significantly different because the amount of money that goes into the instruction operation has typically been number one on the request from the institutions, is that they want money in instruction and operations, because that's what funds their base. So when they're making their requests, usually their number one priority is to put money into instruction and operation.
Yeah, I understand that, and I think we studied that pretty extensively. We understood that their focus wasn't necessarily in a primary allegiance to GME. It was to UME. And that's the problem, is we don't have enough GME. So I'm disappointed, because I thought we made that abundantly clear, and I thought we had all sides nodding their head in agreement and singing Kumbaya on this. And where's the money?
Well, and I would point out, what you see here in Gary's spreadsheet is the GME formula, and then you do have that additional contingency money that is in the bills, that $10 million in the House and $11.5 million in the Senate. That would be for the purposes of a trustee program here at the coordinating board. Our recommendation to create this new initial residency program here at the coordinating board. So those numbers, those contingency numbers, are not reflected in what's here.
And those are Article 11, though, aren't they?
They are contingent on enactment of legislation. So if the legislation is passed, they will be funded.
Okay.
But there is a funding difference, so that would need to be negotiated between the two.
And is this of relevance? Do we need to go over this?
Yes, I can.
I don't understand the colors.
Yeah, I'll help you out on the color coding there. If there's no further questions on the budget.
I have one brief question,
Sure.
and this is there any indication in terms of how this, the issue with regard to some of the shifts that we're seeing occur in some of the institutions with regard to pulling their health science divisions over into the auspices of their academic arm, i.e. A&M, University of Houston is trying to establish a health science center. University of Texas has a pharmacy school which has been funded at the academic rate, and of course is there any, I hope that the legislature settles that situation. Is there any indication of how that's coming along? Has anybody heard anything like that?
I have not. There is nothing that's been in the budget bills that addressed the formula and how the differences between the formula. There was a rider. I'm not sure if it's still in there. There was a rider that addressed it for having the LBB address this issue for the 2016-17 biennium, but I have not seen anything in the budget bills that addresses it for 14-15.
That's correct.
Is that something that our agency is going to have to eventually, is that going to be dumped over into our lap to try to solve that?
It looks like the rider is going to direct the Legislative Budget Board staff to address this issue.
Thank you.
So to close out the conversation on where we are at the legislative session, the last document here is, again, another color-coded. I'll just briefly walk through. If you'll recall, this is the board's list of legislative priorities, which we broke down into 3 tiers, 1, 2, and 3, in terms of major priorities, programmatic changes, and statutory updates and efficiencies. What we've tried to do here in color-coding this is those in green are bills that have been filed and are making their way through the process. There's legislation out there for those priorities. The yellow represents basically recommendations that no legislation has been filed, but we are working on finding places, homes for them via amendment or other avenues to be hopefully passed and moved through the process. And the gray color represents some of the recommendations that we found very little, if none, no support for moving forward on, and I'll walk through those briefly. So we'll start from top to bottom on the first page. We've already talked on outcomes-based funding and where we stand with that, so I'll skip down to the reducing time to degree. The first one there you'll notice is the 60-hour cap on associates program, or a cap limiting the associates programs to no more than what's required by SACs or accrediting agencies. There are 2 bills moving forward, both by the chairman in both Senate Higher Education and House Higher Education. First, this provision is in House Bill 30 by branch, which has already been heard in committee. That bill is pending in committee. And in the Senate side, they have actually already passed it out of the Senate. Senate Bill 497 by Senator Seliger has already cleared the Senate on local and uncontested last week. And so that recommendation is moving very quickly, and hopefully we will see the House move forward on their version here soon. In terms of the recommendation to reduce the threshold for out-of-state tuition and capping funding to institutions, when we talked with legislators about and you've seen the data about the number of credits, the excess credits being accumulated by undergraduates both at our universities and community colleges, there was can't think of any legislator that wasn't compelled by that data, but there simply was not support at this time to move to a recommendation like this. Both chairs of the higher education committees felt that there were other things that could be accomplished. I believe one, or if not both of them, filed some legislation that would require some more counseling up front showing students, how much wages they lose, for example, if they don't graduate on time. What is the benefit of accelerating towards graduation? They also, you'll recall, if our outcomes-based funding model is successful, we have a time-to-degree measure in the university model. So at this time, there just was not any support to move towards that recommendation, unfortunately. And so you'll see there that that's the main reason why that legislation was not filed.
Didn't we do a calculation of what it cost the state at one time? What was that number?
The number for universities for excess credits, when we looked at the graduates from 2011 and basically aggregated all the hours, that those extra hours beyond 120 that's required for most baccalaureates, it came out to about $15 million for that graduating class alone at universities. When we did that same exercise for community college graduates, that one class and all the hours that they had accumulated beyond what's required, typically 66 hours, it was about $42 million. So we did make those numbers aware. I think, again, they recognized the challenge. It just, whether it was they didn't have enough time to really contemplate what the impacts of this recommendation would be, or they felt like there was other avenues to get at, or other ways to get at that problem and fix it. There just wasn't support for moving with this recommendation.
Having said that, that $60 million could be used for any number of other things, of taxpayer money.
Certainly could, and the other issue there too is that we also articulated it's the cost to the student. A typical university graduate takes 27 extra credits, is spending about $6,700 more, either of their own dollars, their parents' dollars, or they're tacking it on to a loan. So, again, it's compelling data, but they just didn't see this recommendation as having much legs at this point. In terms of the restructuring financial aid, first there's the Texas grant. You'll recall we had a series of recommendations on Texas grants, and you'll recall last fall when we approached the board as we started talking through the LAR and legislative recommendations, we were facing a bit of a nightmare scenario in terms of the service levels that we were projecting for new students this next biennium based on where we thought the budget was going to start and based on the number of students that we had coming through the pipeline. And so based on that, the board made a number of recommendations, some designed to shrink the award amounts so that we could stretch those dollars further, limit the number of hours and other things associated with Texas grant, all designed to improve service levels with an understanding that funding, we may not get any better in funding. What has happened since then is a couple of things. One, as John pointed out, both chambers have invested a significant number of new dollars into the program. I think 25 and 20%, I think were the numbers, respectively. So we were in a much better place in terms of investment than we thought we would be 3 or 4 months ago. So that's one bit of good news. So what that has meant is that some of the recommendations, particularly the recommendation to really squeeze the award amount much smaller so that we could serve high percentage of students, that pressure to do that has been relieved. So as John mentioned, current practice, we ask institutions to target Texas grants at $5,000 at universities and $1,325 at community colleges. The LBB and the budget writers have essentially, in calculating their budget for this next biennium and these dollars that they're investing, have endorsed that concept. They have basically said, you'll recall last session, the board made a decision with our authority to ask institutions to target lower amounts so we could stretch last budget's dollars as far as we could. Well, LBB endorsed that process, and because we're able to do that, we're going to serve somewhere between 80 and 87% of students, new students, with this budget, assuming, knock on wood, everything works out as it seems to be working and moving through the process. So what that means is the recommendation related to award amounts is no longer necessary. We're able to serve, I think, a percentage of students that we're comfortable with. That being said, there are some other provisions that are moving forward. For example, House Bill 2468 by Villarreal, he is proposing the recommendation to increase the pathway, the eligibility pathway for transfer students from community colleges, which is one of the major weaknesses of the Texas Grant Program. As you'll recall, right now, the only way you can get a Texas grant at a university if you came from a community college is either one, you were lucky enough to receive a Texas grant while at a community college, or number two, you actually earned an associate's and transferred, which we know most of our transfer students are not earning associates. So what we recommended a broader pathway for transfer students. You know, they have to accumulate so many hours and have a certain GPA, and if they do that, they can qualify for a Texas grant at university. Representative Villarreal is pushing that legislation. In fact, that's being heard today in front of House Higher Education, probably as we speak. The second piece of parts of the recommendations from the board are being championed by Representative Donna Howard via House Bill 2829. There's two pieces in there. One is to provide in statute more flexibility for institutions to package awards for their students, basically giving them some flexibility in how to execute the program so that they can stretch dollars on their campus as far as they'd like. So, for example, one of those recommendations right now, Texas grant in statute is a set amount. It is the maximum tuition and fees. What we're asking is setting that at essentially a maximum amount, and they can provide a lower amount as they deem appropriate for a particular student. And so it's just giving a little more statutory flexibility to allow financial aid officers do their job without being too prescriptive. And then the other piece of her statute is another important change, which is to actually pull community college students out of the Texas Grant Program and serve them exclusively through TEOG, the Community College Grant Program. Again, the rationale for that is TEOG is better suited for community college students. And so by separating out these two programs, it'll be much more coherent. There will be one program for community colleges, one program for universities. They can have different sets of requirements that kind of match the student bodies. And what will happen with that if her bill passes is the coordinating board will be directed to move money out of Texas grants that would have otherwise served those community college students this next biennium and put it into TEOG so that we don't lose any level of service for those students. So those are three components that were part of the Texas grant recommendation that are moving forward. And again, Villarreal's bill is being heard this morning, and we're hopeful that Representative Howard's bill will be heard in the near future.
There's nothing on the Senate side at this point.
Nothing on the Senate side at this point. The only other one I will speak to on the financial aid real briefly is the Beyond Time program. And I think I mentioned this back in January that that was another major reform that the board was recommending that leaders in the Senate and House were, in terms of making Beyond Time a rebate program. There was not support for doing that, and so we've suggested a scaled-back version to increase flexibility, keep money that is accumulated on campus at the campus so that they can use those dollars as opposed to redistributing. Those recommendations have been provided to some key legislators, particularly Senator Zaffarini, who has a Beyond Time bill in the Senate. And so we're hopeful that the scaled-back recommendations that we've provided that, again, are going to provide financial aid officers more flexibility in allocating these dollars will be part of that process moving forward.
Was that part of Sunset?
The part of Sunset was the Sunset recommendation was to basically pull community college students out of the Beyond Time program because it was almost difficult, if not impossible, for them to qualify for forgiveness, as we've seen. So that was one recommendation that they asked, and so Senator Zaffarini is that's what her bill's doing, and we're hopeful she'll add these additional recommendations to that. Finally, just a couple highlights on the rest. One, there was a question earlier about the GME program, and again, that contingency rider, those extra dollars for a trustee grant program. There are two versions of that program moving their way through the legislature. One is being heard today, Senate Bill 143 by Nelson, and House Bill 3692 by Chairman Branch, which has a version of this type of program. And so we're hopeful that as these move through the process, then it'll free up those dollars to use for that purpose.
That's pretty optimistic that you got bills on both sides moving that would enable that.
Yes. In terms of, just looking down here, in terms of highlighting, I think you can see some of the other major and minor recommendations and where they stand. I do want to point out under the statutory updates and efficiencies that we had a number of programs, it's number 16 through 20 there, that either cleaning up some of our reporting requirements or eliminating unnecessary reporting requirements that we've shared with Sunset authors and are hopeful that those will be taken care of through that process. And the two others, just so I highlight for you, or related, or three others, I should say, related to legislation that was not filed, is at the top of page 2. Remember, the board had a recommendation in order to more fully review and provide accountability for our institutions, for-profit institutions and private post-secondary institutions. We had asked for the ability to collect fees from those institutions so that we could staff up in those areas. Unfortunately, that recommendation did not have much legs with some members of the legislature, and so that bill has not been filed. There was also the number 26 there at the bottom related to creation of a financial need requirement for the Armed Services Scholarship Program. Again, there was not an appetite to move forward on that. And the last one there is relating to a methodology on page 3 for setting non-resident tuition rates, and again, that legislation was not filed.
David, who's taking McGregor's spot? And Dom, that number 7 on deferred maintenance, the remandating of reporting of that, how do we make decisions on new projects if we don't know what the deferred maintenance of the institutions are?
Well, and that is a challenge, and we've articulated that to the leadership and to the members. Now, you'll recall we have a bit of a dual challenge there. There are some efforts to essentially take approval authority for capital projects away from the coordinating board altogether.
Right.
And so this is obviously being kind of wrapped up in that conversation. There hasn't been a whole lot of movement on that issue so far at this point in the session. But it's something that we're certainly, continuing to have conversations. That's why we have that in yellow. Continue to have conversations. Hopefully we can convince the members of the legislature that that's an important reporting tool, if nothing else, so that they're aware of, the deferred maintenance, surplus or the deferred maintenance needs in Texas.
Okay. Other questions?
One last thing I'll close with then, and for the new members, and I know many of you have been asking the process for nominations and where we stand with that. We are still waiting. The way the process is going to play out is the appointments office at the governor's office essentially has to give the green light to the nominations committee that the appointments to this board are ready to be heard in front of nominations. And so we're still waiting for the governor's office to make that contact, and then they begin the process of trying to schedule that. What I will tell you is that there's nothing to be worried about. Last session we didn't go until May 16th, so almost towards the end of session. So I wouldn't read into that. Why hasn't this happened? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's just a thing. There's a lot of different committees that, different boards and other appointees and positions that are being heard. So what I would suggest, and what we will probably do here, hopefully by the end of the week, Linda, send out an email to those members who have to be nominated. Since we're kind of now starting to narrow the window between now and end of session, there's only a limited number of Mondays that are possible. What we'd like to get from you is if there's any Monday that you just absolutely, it would take an act of God not to be able to attend, please let us know and identify that. We'll send an email so that you can identify those, so we can communicate those to the committee. We don't have to necessarily keep waiting for the appointments office. But we're narrowing that window, and hopefully soon we'll get notice and we'll schedule. In terms of, as you'll recall, we did reach out to all the members of the nominations committee in the Senate to ask if they were interested in meeting with any or all of the appointees. At this time, there was no interest. Again, I wouldn't read anything negative about that. It could be good. But you also have to understand their schedules are tight, and if it's not on their radar yet, they may want to do that at a later date and time, and if they do, we'll schedule those as appropriate. And then finally, what we'll do today before each one of you leave that's here is we have put together a nominations resource book for you. It has some basic information about closing the gaps, or staffing information about the agency, just something that can hopefully help prepare you for any potential questions that could come up during the process. And of course, staff is ready to help with that in any way that we can. So I just wanted to close with that because I know there's been questions about where we stand.
I think the biggest problem with Mondays is advance notice, clearing a schedule, and if you can express to the parties that are involved, the more notice they give us, the much better possibility of us being here. But being notified today that I need to be here next Monday is going to be difficult. So,
understood. Yes,
and I understand they got a lot of moving parts. But if they can say, "Hey, it's going to be the 16th of May," I can put it on my calendar. I can guarantee I'll be here.
Yes, my experience has been that they do try to do that. I mean, they understand that these are, all these members that they're bringing before nominations, have professions and other things. So they've typically, historically, have, given a couple weeks' notice where those things can be arranged. I would be shocked if they told us, 4 or 5 days in advance, and that would probably be unrealistic. But we'll certainly, that's why I'd like to, if there are certain days that for example, you can't, I'd like to share those in advance, so hopefully that'll start helping with.
Are you going to send us an email to remind us to give you those dates back?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll have either myself or Linda will send you an email later this week asking you to identify any major problem Mondays.
And would it be presumptive to then take that information and go to the governor's appointments office and say, all 5 of my nominees can be here on this Monday or this Monday? Can you ask the committee to set that as our date?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
That's the intent. Sometimes you pull, sometimes you push. So.
Sometimes both.
Yeah.
Kind of hard to push that rope sometimes.
Well, there you go.
Just a matter of information. Are you aware of kind of where the TRB legislation is and kind of what's going on there?
There are TRB bills that have been filed. I'm not aware of any formal discussions that have been going on related to that, but there seems to be a strong momentum, a strong sense of the legislature that something needs to be done on TRBs. But historically, and I'm looking at Gary and perhaps John, historically those things tend to happen really late in session. Things just start to move all of a sudden once they get past the budget and some other things. So just because there hasn't been any formal movement of TRBs, I would not, again, interpret that as being, there's no support for it. I think there seems to be a lot of talk and support for it, but those typically happen later in the session if I'm not mistaken.
There was a subcommittee that looked at the information about each one of the projects, and I believe is on the Senate side. There was a state facilities work group that made some recommendations about the projects back to Senate Finance.
Yeah,
and that's where it's at right now.
Well, and we had provided the ranking of those to the legislature. I know that. Okay.
And I would just add that the Senate version of the appropriations bill does contain a contingency rider to fund new TRBs. I believe it's $200 million. That's just a number I'm sure they just set to be able to capture whatever they wanted to approve.
$200 million out of how many billion in requests?
Yeah.
That would be the debt service.
Okay.
Yes, that'd be for the 14-15 debt service.
Projects.
Interest payments.
Okay. Anything else, gentlemen? Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay. I believe items 5G, 1, 2, and 3 were on the consent agenda. Is that correct?
Yes.
That brings us to item 5H, which is lunch.
So we should recess until noon?
I don't think we can start the cause committee meeting until noon. Is that correct?
So
okay.
Maybe recess until 11:55.
11:55 and go from there.
Move we recess until 11:55 a.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries.